Hey guys, Cecil here once again. I wanted to do a video today and talk to you about the Super Nintendo Classic that formally got announced today, which is Monday, June 26, 2017, for the record. And needless to say, like the NES Classic, when that got announced last summer, this has been generating a lot of hype and pub online. A lot of it good, a little bit bad. I'm going to get into the details and the nitty-gritty of it a little bit in case you hadn't heard about it. But needless to say, what you're going to be getting, if you weren't familiar with the NES Classic, it was a system that came out last Christmas, more or less a glorified plug-and-play system that had 30 games built into it. This one's going to have 20 Super Nintendo games built into it, and they're going to be charging $79.99. Well, excuse me, 21 games, and I'll get into the details of that one extra that is a pretty awesome addition to this. So some might be thinking right off the bat, well, I got 30 games on the last one and they only asked 60 bucks for that, but now they're asking 80 bucks for 20 games. Well, you kind of got to think about it. If you look at Nintendo's pricing on their virtual console on like the Wii and the Wii U, they've generally charged $5 for regular NES games and $7.99 or $8 for Super Nintendo games. So at least in Nintendo's mind, you can argue value and things like that, and till the cows come home. But at the end of the day, Nintendo themselves value Super Nintendo games a little bit more. Now on the NES Classic, the 30 games averaged out to about $2 a game, and the 20 or 21 or so games on the Super Nintendo Classic, that averages out to about $4 a game. So it's not a huge difference when you look at the average value and everything. You know, a buck or two more. Some people might value Super Nintendo games a little bit more than regular NES games too. They're a little bit more with them as far as graphics and things. So, like I said, it's kind of a subjective thing, admittedly, but I can kind of see where Nintendo's coming from as far as a value perspective. And also with the Super Nintendo Classic, you are getting two Wii Classic Super Nintendo-like controllers versus just the one in the NES Classic. And to get a second controller in the NES Classic, that was an additional $10. So that technically upped the price to about $70. So asking 10 more bucks for the Super Nintendo Classic, if you're going to throw two controllers in there, isn't a huge up in the pricing, if you ask me. Now, if they were asking more along the lines of $100 or more, then you might argue pricing might be a bit of a faux pas on their part, but 80 is a pretty reasonable price for the value that's coming with these 21 Super Nintendo games. So I will say, looking at the list, I'll just read them off real quick. Contra 3, Donkey Kong Country, Earthbound, Final Fantasy 3, which was Final Fantasy 6 in Japan, F-Zero, Kirby Superstar, Kirby Dream Course, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, Mega Man X, Secret of Mana, Star Fox 1, Star Fox 2, Super Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Super Castlevania 4, Super Ghouls and Ghosts, Super Mario Kart, Super Mario RPG, Super Mario World, Super Metroid, Super Punch-Out, and Yoshi's Island, Super Mario World 2. So, looking at the games here, that's 21 really, really awesome games, and that represents a pretty good, well-rounded segment of the Super Nintendo library. Now, you can argue, well, why didn't they put Chrono Trigger on there instead of Final Fantasy 3? Or where are the other couple of Donkey Kong Country games? Or, things like that. Where's Mario All-Stars? Things like that. And you got to kind of look at it, especially with third-party games, guys. There's licensing, there's royalties that probably have to be paid. You can only put so many games on a box like this in this day and age, and still plan on making money on it. So while you can definitely have your dream list of games all you want, I think this is a pretty reasonable cross-section of the Super Nintendo library to have on a device like this. And the big inclusion with this is Star Fox 2. Now, why this is a pretty huge addition to a device like this, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, Star Fox 2 never actually came out before this. This was originally a Super Nintendo follow-up to the original Star Fox that was due out in like 1995-96, and by the time the game was due to come out, The N64 was already on the way, and Nintendo had Star Fox 64 in the development pipeline, and probably not to want to take away from Star Fox 64, they probably just canceled Star Fox 2 outright. And to this day and age, on any original cart, any kind of virtual console or anything, Nintendo has never released this game, even though it was pretty much done. They've never released it in any official capacity until now. So to have an official licensed game and actually have this coming out from Nintendo and then basically acknowledging, hey, yeah, it's real, here it comes, it is actually pretty huge, especially when it comes to the retro gaming community, because you can download ROMs of beta versions of the game, but to actually have the final completed version in an official capacity from Nintendo is a pretty big deal in my opinion, and probably why a lot of people are going to look to pick this up. So needless to say, I am pretty excited for this, just for the fact I've never actually played Star Fox 2. And all these other games are well worth the $4 a piece this averages out to. Now, kind of, it's going to probably still have the same 2.5 foot cords like the NES Classic did. And yes, that is a pretty annoying thing to say the least. But you also have to remember these are technically Wii Classic controllers. And if you ever had a Wii Classic controller, you know the cords are only 2.5 feet. So this doesn't really surprise me, and I'm pretty fortunate to the fact I bought a couple of 6-foot Wii Classic controller extension cables for my NES Classic so I could sit further away back from my TV when I used it. So I've already got a couple of those ready to go with this, so I won't actually have to buy new ones for that. And I'm sure there's also going to be wireless solutions and third-party alternatives to these controllers if you don't want to use the stock 2.5 foot wired controllers that are going to come with this. So there are going to be alternatives to it. The big thing that I'm sure a lot of people are worried about with this is how are they going to handle manufacturing and getting enough out of into the pipeline to meet demand, because this is probably going to have just as much, if not pretty close to the same amount of hype and demand as the NES one. And Nintendo, I would feel most people would agree, dropped the ball pretty much on, excuse my cat, they dropped the ball on getting enough out there to meet the demand. I mean, when you get the casual gamer who doesn't really play much, you know, maybe had a Wii or maybe had an NES back in the day, and they were, you know, wanting this thing. When you get that broad casual gaming crowd wanting a device, needless to say, there is going to be very, very sharp demand for it. And I can only pray Nintendo hopefully learn their lesson from the NES Classic and is going to make enough of these damn things to at least meet the bulk of the demand, so you don't have scalpers flipping these on eBay for, you know, 4 or 5 times the price like the NES Classic was, especially last Christmas and after back in April when they formally discontinued the NES Classic. So I don't know what you got to do, Nintendo. I know they're never going to see this video. I'm sure it's going to fall on deaf ears, and I'm sure they've got, you know, a number of consoles they want to make in their minds already. But my God, if you can at least get enough out in the pipeline to meet the bulk of the demand, I think you're going to do yourself so much as far as positive PR and sales in general. I to this day, I never understood why you didn't want to get more of NES Classics out there. It's like you're allergic to money. Now, I guess maybe you don't want to devalue your games too much, or, you know, there's always the, you know, wanting people to buy a Switch or a 3DS or a Wii U for that virtual console and things like that. But I just think you'd make so much more damn money if you actually made enough of these to meet the demand. And that's why I'm keeping my fingers crossed that they learn their lesson from the NES Classic, and they're going to at least get a decent number more out there to try to meet the demand better. That's all we can really hope. So let me know what you guys think of this. Are you pretty excited like me? Are you pretty meh on it? Do you think they should have put other games in there? Let me know what games you think should be on this thing, or, you know, you would have liked to have seen. And as always, guys, as always, you take it easy, and I'll see you next time.